Hello and welcome again to the Leading with Integrity podcast. It's been said that innovation is the key to survival. Many argue that this capacity for innovation is in fact one of the reasons why humanity has been so successful as a species, so far at least. And the same is true for business. To achieve true longevity means innovating, not just coming up with a one-off innovation that you sell until it's old news, but consistently looking for new and better ways of achieving success as a business, both internally in the way you work and what you work with and how you do things, and with your products and services and your external facing elements. I'm joined in this episode by my guest, Bruno. Bruno is an expert at turning corporate innovation into successful strategy, and he provides practical, achievable steps to help you do the same.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Thank you very much for joining me today, Bruno. And I like to start with just asking all of my guests really the same question, which is to tell us a little bit more about your background, your career history, and what you're up to today.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, first, pleasure to be here with you and to also share a little bit more about the topic that we are going to be discussing. I'll try to be very brief because I guess people don't tune in to hear about my life path, but kind of the topic that we will get to. So I started my career as an engineer in defense industry. And one of the early lessons I experienced was that when I was working with a team on a very specific product, we managed to develop the best product technical specification wise, but we had big trouble selling them. Nobody believed us that we could make a product so good. So for me, that was a very important moment because I realized, oh wait, I mean, obviously innovation isn't just about the best product. It's also how we talk about the product. And there were a lot of leadership lessons in the process as well, kind of, how to handle something like that, how to handle a young team of engineers trying to navigate the situation and so on. That was now almost 10, 12 years ago. And since then, I traveled the world. I worked with both small companies and large companies, primarily in the innovation space, coming up with new products, services, and businesses that delight people and make companies a little bit more rich, wealthy, or better. That's it in a nutshell, I would say.
Very cool. So what would you say has been, I guess, your biggest challenge or biggest obstacle since you went out on your own?
First, I love being independent. I just say independent. That's kind of the term I like the most. I wouldn't say obstacle, but it is something that people don't often think about when they ask me, oh, Bruno, you're independent. I would like to do that as well, is selling yourself, unfortunately, has very little to do how good you are at whatever service you're providing. And that's like, as independent expert, that was a big lesson for me because I just assume, all my clients were delighted. They were so happy. And I assume, well, if they're happy, it's going to be easy to find other clients. But if I don't ask them to introduce me to other people or, to speak about some things we did together, they won't do it. And why would we? I mean, when you have a great lunch, maybe you will tell your friends, oh, that restaurant, mind-blowing food, you should go there. But you probably won't, be going around and saying, hey, you know what? If you thought about getting dinner, you should go to that place. So it's very different. And that to me was a big lesson. Would I call it obstacle? Probably not, but something very, very important to success for any independent professional.
Yeah, I mean, it's a familiar story, I confess. It's something that when I first went out myself, it was something that almost felt distasteful. But at the end of the day, if you want to have a successful business, you've got to put yourself out there. So we've all just got to learn that lesson, as you say. My next question is going to be, how did you overcome that? But if it wasn't really an obstacle, it was just a lesson learned.
Well, I did do some things. You're correct. Even though I didn't qualify it as obstacles, you still need to deploy some text. You need to do some things. So for myself, and I'm not saying this, go copy this, guaranteed success, but I know that for myself, what I decided to do, in addition to actually explicitly asking my clients during the relationship, hey, can you make an introduction? What I did with you, I'd be happy to do that with other people. Of course, you have to be careful that it's not a direct competitor. But the other thing that I focused a lot on was I write a lot and I make everything public. So people that go to my website, I write about my processes. I write about innovation strategy, how to do it, not like, wheeled trying to sell it, but kind of, here is what I do. Here is how you can do it as well. Bam, bam, bam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., etc. Bunch of videos, bunch of material, etc. And I just put it out there. And, it's always a little bit challenging with the digital space, even though you have a lot of analytics and etc. So I don't know if that's a good or bad choice, but I decided not to optimize for, like search engine optimization and stuff like that, but for usefulness, practical stuff. So maybe it's not picked up by 10 million views, but I can say it's been picked up, by universities, by prospects, by future clients, etc. And I know it's difficult for some people. So I know that, I write a lot compared to most of the people, but I just put a schedule for myself. I said, 3 blog posts a week and just they go.
Wow, 3 a week. That's impressive. Well done to you. I struggle with 1 a month. No, that's good. I mean, it's really... I think it's a good way to focus on it as well. I think, a lot of people go down that SEO rabbit hole and they're all focused on what the tech and what Google wants to see or equivalents. But actually, at the end of the day, if you don't have something that's actually useful to people, then really what's the point,
And what's important to remember is if you're writing this for someone specifically, who are these people, what are they reading, and what do they not necessarily like to read, but what do they appreciate to read? So for myself, I basically balance between, hey, I'm literally writing for myself, like this is the process that I used and I'm happy to share it, but I also write it for people I use it with. So it will be, people in organizations that do want to improve their innovation processes, institute innovation management, whatever. So it's that is who I focus on. Of course, basic ACO should still be there. You should have a good title. You should have an image. You should have a good blogging platform, WordPress, Ghost, whatever. But as you say, like focusing on the technical stuff won't make such a huge difference unless you're in the spamming space.
Yes. Well, let's not talk about that. So on the subject of writing, I know that you've recently published a book as well called Augmented Strategy, I believe. What makes a strategy augmented as opposed to not? And what are the key themes of the book?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and kind of what I like to say, when you ask people what is strategy, let alone augmented strategy, you ask 10 people, you get 20 definitions. So what I'll just here, I'm not proposing the definition of strategy, but just kind of how I usually describe strategy. Among other things, strategy is basically an informed assumption about achieving specific goals. Why do I frame it like that? Is because no matter how much time or brains or effort you put in a strategy, there's no guarantee of outcome. So that's why I called it's informed guess. You do some sort of analysis, you have some situation or objective that you want to achieve, and then you design a strategy from A to B, etc., etc., etc. What makes augmented strategy, in addition to that, different is augmented strategy specifically focuses on enriching these informed assumptions with 4 specific data sets. That's why we call it augmented, because we add data together with human intuition. So you will hear a lot of narratives that say, ignore your gut feeling, focus only on raw data, that. But we are not robots. And gut feeling is not black magic. What people usually describe as gut feeling is a combination of your lived experience. So, you don't exist in a vacuum. That's what a gut feeling is. I experienced that before. I cannot really verbalize what I'm feeling and thinking right now, but it doesn't feel right, or it feels right. That is human intuition. So the right way forward is not to ignore that and say raw data is the best, robot overlords will rule the world. That's not the way. It is combining, okay, let's use the best data we have together, because we humans, our brains are very sophisticated data interpretation and decision making. I don't want to say machines, but organs, devices, whatever. So combining these two is what my co-author Dominic Dellerman and myself call augmented strategy. And one of the things that I said down, you remember how I said, when I write for people that are supposed to read this. So I told Dominic, and Dominic has a PhD in actually artificial intelligence, human intelligence, etc. And I said, Dominic, I want us to write the book on such a difficult topic that is 100 pages or less. I don't want the PhD dissertation. Like, we are not writing this for people like you and me that will go and, develop algorithms. I want the average Joe, to pick up the book and say, oh, wait, this isn't so difficult. I mean, I can do this. Yeah, like these data sets, I don't need a PhD. I don't need to hire an army of consultants or data, scientists to figure this out. And I'm happy to say that we did manage, I think it's 80 pages, actually. Wow. And it's kind of, you can read it in a day. The core idea, as I said, is leverage the 4 data sets to make better decisions. Customer experience, operational data, expert data, and ecosystem data. And I'll stop here because I could talk for hours about each of these data sets.
Well, for 80 pages at least, anyway. Yeah. That's really good. I really like informed assumptions. That's a really good definition of strategy. And I think a lot of people almost view strategy as like the gold standard. This is what we've said we're going to do, therefore we'll do it, and it doesn't matter what else happens in between when we set it and we get there. And I think that's where the data has to come in. I'm a big believer in balance in a lot of things, hybrid working, containing within your strategy the data and the intuition elements. It's very important, because I think if you follow one and not the other, whichever one it is, you're going to end up with a worse strategy and a worse outcome. So it's really good. I very much applaud that, and I'd love to read the book as well, actually.
We can fix that later.
No, it wasn't a hint, honest. No, it's fine. Something else that I have to ask about, because I'm quite an avid gamer in my spare time. You've also created a board game, and that's aimed at teaching innovation and entrepreneurship skills. So can you tell us a bit more about that, and maybe how the game works? Because I'm really interested about that.
Yeah, would love to. So the game is called Playing Lean. My friend Simon Fure Jorgensen, who was the guy who came up with the idea. First, he used to run IT consultancy. And among other things, what they were teaching their clients were different agile methodologies. Right. Back in the day when they didn't turn into such a big business like they are today. Yeah. So what he encountered, a challenge was, you cannot really give a book to a bunch of executives and tell them, read it, and then we're going to start doing that. And that is what he tried to do with Lean Startup. He would get the Lean Startup book, he would give it to them, and it didn't work so well. What they did use was one game called Get Kanban. So it is a great game for teaching Kanban in software development, project management, etc. And he said, okay, I love games. I want to do that with Lean Startup. There was no game. Let's make one. And then it was a bit of a process. But in terms of a game, it's a physical board game. It is close to strategy games. So you have different teams. They pretend to be different entrepreneurial companies. And then you decide, am I going to put my employees to develop product? Am I going to put them to do customer development, experiment, find out what the customer wants? Do I want to do sales? Do I want to send them on training? So very few options, but a lot of combinations. And as people play and they do experiments, they learn more about the customers. Every card teaches them a new concept in Lean Startup: minimum viable products, customer interviews, problem solution fit. A lot of different concepts that are useful to develop new products, test innovative ideas, and take them to market. And that's pretty much it, the setup. And it's been now 6-7 years, and I'm happy to say, we sold out 2 versions already. We have more than 300 facilitators globally, and it's a very fun project to work on. Yeah. And one of the very surprising things is we have people telling us that they're literally playing the game just to play it. They don't care about entrepreneurship. They don't care about innovation. They just play the game to win it and to crush everybody who plays against them.
Yeah, I guess that's good feedback, isn't it?
It is. It's a proper game.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, and I guess it's always good to see people come up with alternative ways of using something that you've created, I guess. Oh, I love that, though. I mean, anything where there's kind of a novel approach to training, really, isn't it? At the end of the day, that's a very cool idea. Yeah.
I mean, gamification is very potent. Of course, gamification, like all the techniques, can be easily abused As you see, like people using gamification to develop employee applications that kind of motivate them to spend more time on their job. But using gamification in teaching and learning and education, a lot of potential, for ethical purposes, for improved learning. And why games are so powerful in executive space and management space is because we like to say, fail fast, don't be afraid to fail, learn from failure. Yes, but you cannot fail, and have business go bankrupt, employees leaving you. So yes, small failures are fine, but failures like, that lead to closures of divisions are never good. And when you play a game, you can fail really big. Other players will laugh at you or maybe mock you a little bit, but that's the worst that can happen. But our brain actually doesn't differentiate that much between a situation in a game and a real life situation. That's why games are so powerful, because you have that safe space to really fail hard and then connect that to real environment. So when David could have a conversation, we want to introduce a new product. And I say, David, let's just decide the budget, put down the project plan, and it will be in the market in 7 months. And then David, you can say, hey, remember when we played last week and you tried to use the same approach and then nobody wanted to buy it and we lost in the end? How about we do something else instead? And then I can actually visualize that because I had a similar experience to say, David, that does make some sense. The whole negotiation and actually combining experience with practice becomes much, much easier, even though the game setting is completely fake. Like there was no real money. There were no real decisions that impacted my company. But my brain doesn't care because I experienced that. I had the emotion and I can connect the dots. Sorry for...
No, that's really interesting. I think the key thing there, and it's funny you mentioned fail fast and fail forward and all that, and a lot of the people who are kind of putting that approach out in the world, I think they don't talk enough about the key part of that process, which is fail, take the lesson from that failure, and then adjust next time. Because otherwise, as you say, you just go out of business. And I think the key part there that you were talking about in explaining the way the game works is you're taking the lessons from the game and you're applying that learning to the real world. And it's that is the key bit that sort of closes the loop for me. That I don't think people talk about that enough. But
absolutely.
I spent a few years actually myself working in a business that was fairly focused on innovation. I think it was fair to say the innovation part of it was about the products we were trying to develop and maybe less about the way we were operating the business. But I think from the point of view of innovation itself and the creativity and getting a new product to market, I think two things that I learned from that experience was we really struggled with prioritizing and selecting which ideas to move forward with. We had many voices, many very clever people in the business, and so many, many ideas. And sometimes it got quite contentious, actually, about which product to pursue and which one to throw in the bin and so on. And secondly was execution. So once we finally did, after many arguments, settle on we're going to do this one this month, it's then the company as a whole great at sort of generating those ideas and coming up with those possibilities, but then actually implementing any of those and getting them actually to market and putting them in front of a paying customer was another thing that was really difficult. Perhaps because of the first problem, we just spun too long in the ideas and didn't get to the end bit. I guess my question is, what steps would you suggest a company take to get past those kinds of issues?
Unfortunately, what you share isn't so unique. As I say, unfortunately, every company runs into a problem like that, small or big. What is usually very important is what you identified immediately as the first stage, like prioritizing, selecting ideas, etc. What I like to say is prioritizing ideas is a waste of time. But that only works if you have the preceding steps that I'll share with you. If you imagine an ideal system is like a flowing river. What comes, passes. That is the ideal system for any idea in a functioning organization that wants to innovate. So any idea that is relevant and comes, the workers or people proposing should be able to work on it. But that only works if they work in a specific way. In order to prevent garbage coming in and garbage coming out, the company should have what we discussed earlier, a functioning strategy. And it doesn't have to be a fancy strategy at all, but when I say a functioning strategy, a good strategy is something that every employee in a company understands, and they can make a decision based on that. So if I walk into your company and ask 10 employees, what are the products you're delivering? Why are your customers buying those products? What are they doing with them? And where does your company want to be in the next 5-10 years, whatever they decided to put in their strategy? If employees cannot answer that, but only top management, you don't have a good strategy. You don't have understandable strategy. So then the people will be bringing forward stupid or irrelevant ideas, but not because they are stupid or irrelevant, but because the top management hasn't clarified way forward. And then contention happens, then conflict happens, all of these things. So assuming a company has a functioning strategy, next thing is clarifying innovation filters, or just call them filters. These are the problems, customer outcomes, whatever that we want to improve or achieve. These are the business models we want to invest in. These are technologies we want to use. It doesn't have to be very specific, but just few sentences on these 3 questions helps everybody come up with better ideas and then makes them trivial. You just ask question, do they fit in any of these 3 filters? If yes, David, if you have time and your boss thumbs up, go work on this idea. But working on that idea doesn't mean spend 10 million pounds to develop it. It means spend 2 to 3 weeks to see if this makes sense. And then, think about stepwise. That's why I say, if you use that approach, prioritizing ideas is a waste of time. They will self-prioritize. If you have clear direction, clear innovation filters, and everybody understands that they're allowed to spend maybe 2 to 3 weeks just to test if this idea makes sense, what survives is worth of at least one management meeting to inspect this idea. Should we maybe create a team? Should we maybe put a little bit of money behind it? Not all the money, not, go to the market in a month and a half, but kind of, taking it to the next step. Test if there's viability, test if there's market demand, whatever. Is it feasible to make, whatever. But those simple, small first steps, they're critical, because innovation is a numbers game at the end of the day. You will not create the future of the company with one single idea. And those stories that are one single idea, they're outliers. You cannot build the success of your company on outliers.
Yeah.
Systems are for improving the average, not for improving, that one superstar or that one random occurrence of great luck that happened or whatever.
Yes, or the Steve Jobs factor. Yeah, I wish we'd had that kind of knowledge back then. It was 5 or 6 years ago now, but never mind. We all learn, don't we? Turning to leadership itself, since that's one of the themes that I love to talk about, as I'm sure my listeners have got used to by now. Based on your career experience and perhaps some of the experiences you've had with clients you've worked with over the years, what are the biggest sort of leadership and management lessons that you've learned, and how do they inform the way you work today?
Ooh, that's a big question. So maybe just focus on a few ones. So I was fortunate and unfortunate enough to experience both leadership that I respect and don't respect. So in some companies, I've seen like, oh, wow, this isn't the way I want to lead. This isn't the way I want to be led. And in other companies, I've seen, oh, this is really good. Of course, there's always cultural differences, but I came to really believe that respect is extremely important in leadership. And I use the word respect instead of kind of liking, disliking, things like that. So every company, every venture, of course, there needs to be a small friction, some disagreements here and there, because if it was so easy, then everybody would have extremely successful company. There will be a moment where you will need to fire someone, where you will need to disagree in the management team and say, hey, it's gonna be option B instead of option A. I understand some of you disagree, but I need your commitment and we need to move forward, because we cannot just stand at the crossroad and wait for what's going to happen. So in those moments, it's extremely important, in order to be able to lead, to have that respect of your peers, to kind of say, I disagree with you, but I trust you, I respect you, so I'm willing to follow you into the situation, to follow you into the fray, to follow into what's going to happen. And your show is called Leading with Integrity. And integrity, to me, is critical for that respect, for that trust. And I don't know what definition you have of integrity, but for me, whenever I think about integrity, it is doing as you have said. So if you have a leader that said, you're going to do A, follow me, and everybody follows doing A, and then the leader pulls back and says like, haha, suckers, I thought actually B because you failed with A. B, I always meant that you guys didn't deliver on B because, you just don't get it.
Yeah.
So
no, it's right. I think it's tied up in that concept of authenticity as well, isn't it? It's what you say, what you do, what you say your values are. They all need to be well aligned. They all need to match up. You can't, exactly that example you've just given, you can't have one rule for everyone else and another one for yourself. And I think, trust and respect, they're all really tied up in that. Those are two concepts as well that it's important to remember they go both ways. A bad manager will just rely on the fact that the employees respect them because they have to and it's their job. But actually, you should be seeking to build and encourage that trust, that respect. You shouldn't just be relying on it as your almost like your fallback position that things will be done because they have to. And it is a really important thing that is far too easily overlooked, I think.
And the trust, you spend so much time building it, but you can lose it in a second. In one decision, you can lose 10 years of trust just like that. So it is good to be deliberate about it and conscious and aware of leadership behaviors. What are you doing? How are you showing up in front of others? Not just relying on luck.
Yeah, one of the best ways of encouraging people to trust and respect you is you treat them with trust and respect. There's so many managers that just don't think to do that. It doesn't, I don't know, they've never had the example doing it for them, so they don't realize it's part of their job. But actually, it absolutely is. Changing topic a little bit, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that leaders and managers make?
One mistake that always comes to my mind is leaders mistaking their success for only and only their own effort. What I mean by that is great employees can make a shitty leader shine. So after some time, if you have been in an executive position for a very, very long time and you have surrounded yourself with smart people, like even if you have crappy strategy, even if you have bad management systems, bad practices, etc., your division or business might still perform really, really well, but not because of you, despite of you. So that is one common mistake I see. And antidote to that is regular reflection. So kind of understanding, looking back, is this because of me? Is this just because of them? How did the understanding one's own impact within the system? So that's one mistake. Another one that I often see is connected to the first one. Leaders fall into this trap that they're in a leadership position and then others start inviting them to other leadership positions. There's nothing wrong with that, but what happens over time with quite a number of leaders I have seen, they become more and more distant from the front line, from the daily operations and etc. They still have good contributions in different societies, different parts of the organization, etc. But their decision making and their thought process slowly over time drifts away from the daily operations and daily understanding of the business. And that then suddenly transform into making decisions and proposing options that don't have that much to do with the future of the business. That is where you have a situation when a VP of product or VP of marketing comes up with product ideas and then loves them so much that they don't want to hear Doug or Bruno. It's, go and do it, kind of just do this idea because I know best. I have a leadership position. I am serving on this and this board and kind of calling David and he's going to do analysis and whatnot. It's a waste of time, waste of money, and potentially a big flop at the end of the day. And the third mistake I often see in leadership positions is, I see it's again connected to the first one, is that lack of reflection in the long run. And when I say reflection, not just leaders, but everybody focuses on successes a lot. Let's replicate the great success we had. Of course, that sounds logical. Why not? But a lot of research shows and data shows that actually focusing on avoiding failures and doing stupid stuff is actually more beneficial in the long run than trying to replicate successes, of Amazon, Google, Apple, etc. They all had their unique reasons. But if you look at the causes of failure, they are much more generalizable than causes of successes. So kind of looking at the things that we discussed. Well, let's not have a useless strategy. Let's not have bad employment practices. Let's not have, bad management practices. Avoiding those actually has more impact than trying, hey, that cool thing from Ray Dalio, we should do that. Rank and Yank was very, very cool when it was rolled out. Now, 20 years later, everybody agrees, horrible practice. Nobody thought that 20 years ago. Then reflection here is important, because you don't just think, hey, we wanted to succeed, why did we succeed? But you also think, hey, why did we fail? What led to that failure? What we discussed earlier. Focus on the learning, not on the failure itself. And there is one more case that people often overlook. When you succeed, but you did not expect to succeed.
Yeah.
So like you introduce new product, whatever feature, and you think, we're gonna win 1% market share, but you win 8%. Mind-blowing. Everybody's celebrating. You get a raise, that leader gets promoted to a C function, whatever. But why? Why was it such a big success? And you thought it's going to be smaller success. There are big learnings in that. So all these 3 scenarios, you succeeded, why? You succeeded more than expected, why? You failed, why? Leaders must reflect on all of those. Focusing just on successes, of course, doesn't suck. It's good to reflect a little bit, but much more value can be gotten out of reflecting on the full spectrum of outcomes.
Yes. The third one can be linked to the first as well, can't it? Because if all you ever do is you have the kind of a tunnel vision focus on your success, it becomes a self-fulfilling thing where you start believing your own hype, and you lose that. It's ego versus self-awareness, isn't it? Is the real conflict there. And everyone needs a healthy amount of ego, otherwise you'd never get out of bed in the morning. But you need to temper it with self-awareness and recognize that actually sometimes you're going to get stuff wrong. It's not going to go your way. And then, as you say, focus on why that's happened and learn from it.
It's kind of, you have the whole, as a leader, you have the environment that doesn't really help in a way, because we like heroes, we like winners, we like stories, of one guy or woman against all odds, winning, David against Goliath, etc. So you have the whole environment that's slowly putting you up on pedestal. The more successful you are, the more they're putting you up, and you start you get that halo effect. People consider you, as infallible, almost saint-like, things like that. That, of course, doesn't then support, I'm going to fail a little bit and I'm going to, learn from that. So you have this environment where everybody wants to put you on a pedestal, but if you want to remain the successful and good leader, you have to actively reject that. So kind of work through reflection. As you said, you need some sort of ego. You do need ego to run a successful company, even if it's a small one, especially if it's a larger one. You need a healthy dose of ego and confidence, but not becoming arrogant, not allowing hubris to get in the way so you cannot make good decisions.
It's really quite challenging, isn't it? Because leadership positions are naturally kind of built and focused towards the sort of person that has that unhealthy ego that does go a few steps too far. Because, even just at the basic level, the people with those massive egos are the ones most likely to apply for those jobs, because they see it and they think, well, that's me, I can do that. And it never occurs to them that maybe they might not be the best at it. And sometimes that's great and it works out really well. Sometimes not so much. What do you think then on the opposite side of it? Certainly in the experience in your industry and the industries you've worked with, what would you say leaders do get right? What do they do really well?
We already discussed respect, so I won't repeat myself that much. I'm based in Oslo, Norway. And what I can say here, so I'm actually a Croatian. So I moved to Norway maybe roughly 2016, but I was here first time as a student, 2012 or something like that. And what I immediately noticed, in Norway, there's different relationship with work and to work compared to, let's say, other European countries, and definitely compared to Croatia. And one of the things that, of course, in America, they would say, oh, this is horrible. So many unions, worker is so protected. And of course, it does introduce some challenges. But at the same time, just because the way whole system is set up, it actually allows for healthier relationship between employee and work. and companies. So I can really say that I've seen here a lot of transparency and much flatter structures than you would expect in other parts and other companies. So even in a large multinational companies, large in Norwegian standard, 10,000 employees or more. So it's not like, Coca-Cola, but, even in large Norwegian companies, it will be relatively flat structure. And, in rare cases, will somebody look down on you like, why are you working with me? I'm a manager, I'm vice president. Like, how about you talk to my assistant instead? That doesn't happen so often. Very, very rarely I've seen things like those. And all of these things I love in the Norwegian style of leadership, if I try to generalize a little bit. So this inherent respect, transparency, assumption of well-doing, attempting to do well. That is also something that I really have come to respect and appreciate here in the Norwegian culture. So kind of, if something goes wrong, the failure that we discussed. So kind of in some cultures, you will have people and our employees immediately assuming that there was some, he's doing that on purpose. Like he failed because he wants to sabotage me, he doesn't want that project to succeed. That isn't so common, for example, here in the Norwegian culture, and thinking it will be like, no, it's very rare that someone is going to even think in that direction. It will be more like thinking like, what went wrong? Let's look at it together, let's fix it together. And here they have this, I hope I don't butcher it, dugnad. So it's kind of, everybody coming together and cleaning the building. People come together, clean the road and things like that. So there is this a little bit of collectivism in the individualism. So it's not extreme, like, for example, some of the Asian cultures when it's us above me. And it's not also extreme like North American culture, me above us. So it's kind of like a healthy mix, between me and us, kind of coming together to fix things. And I know there's been a medley of things, nothing you can just take and copy, but it is something that, I experience as, hey, this is a good style. Like, we should try to deliberately emulate some of it at least.
Yeah, I think there's value in leadership as part of a community rather than above everyone else. There's certainly a more modern approach to leadership. And it's really interesting as well to hear the national culture differences as well. Because, the UK, we've got some challenges. When it comes to leadership in a business setting, one of our big things is this whole accidental manager, where you promote someone because they've been in a job for X number of years, or because they're the best person in that team, as opposed to you think they'll be a good manager. But then having done that, you don't provide them any training. You don't teach them how to do their new job. And you just sort of push them in at the deep end and expect them to figure it out on their own. And that's such a weird phenomenon to me. Even having grown up here and always worked in this culture, it still seems weird to me. We wouldn't do that for almost any other job. So why do we do it to managers? It's very strange.
Because they have so much impact, it kind of just echoes through the organization. Absolutely. So I completely agree with your observation.
Yeah, and you just end up, what people will do by default, because it's all they've got, is they'll just copy whatever their manager used to do. So you end up with this, if there's a bad manager, then give it 5 years and every manager in the business is a bad manager because you're not doing anything to fix that problem. So combining, I guess, our two areas of expertise, and I'm going to ask you another question now, which is, from a leadership perspective, what do you think managers and CEOs should be doing to foster innovation in their organizations?
So I'm just going to focus on the innovation space, not like general. We already discussed some things, so I'll just briefly repeat. I won't go into details. So if we think about organizations and innovating within organization, from the management perspective, from the leadership perspective, the most valuable, the most important thing you can do is to really clarify the strategy so everybody understands it. Because it's not leaders' full-time job to come up with million ideas. You want your employees to be coming up with ideas all the time, because half of them are not going to be great or spectacular, but you need them to reach those few pearls. In order for your employees to really be motivated to put forward, what is critical is that they have system to put forward their idea, and that they understand which ideas are going to be looked at and how are they going to be funded. what is the absolutely worst thing you can do? And that unfortunately happens often is leadership comes and organizes some sort of an event that will be maybe day 2, 3 days. They get external speakers, they get, those creative boxes, maybe some Lego sets, whatever. And, they collect 80 ideas. And then they send people back to their daily job and nobody ever hears back. Did my idea suck? Was it accepted? Maybe somebody gets some chocolate or whatever, best idea of the day. Absolutely worst thing you can do is leave hanging. It is not a problem if you tell them we will not pick your idea or your idea was rejected. They don't care. People care about is hearing what has happened with their proposal. So back to the first one. If you have a clear strategy, if you have clear innovation filters, then it's trivial to say, hey, these are the types of ideas we invite. David is our guy. He's just going to take a look at the things. If, just check your boxes. If you're with this, David is going to take a look. And then the next step is, do you agree when are you going to spend your whatever, 2-week, 3-week period, whatever time to kind of investigate the idea. Small, simple steps like that are important. And the third one, which unfortunately, it's difficult to fix it immediately, but that is rewarding curiosity. So unfortunately, our education system also doesn't reward a lot of curiosity. Our education system rewards, you have a standardized exam, you're going to pass it, you're going to get ranked on it, and that's how your grade is going to be determined. There might be some creative part, but even that creative part is expected to be standardized to some extent. So kind of curiosity in itself is not awarded. And what I mean by curiosity, the simplest way is allowing people to ask questions and not making them feel stupid for asking a question. Questions as, why is there a leak here? Why are we doing it that way? Why is that a circle instead of a square? Like in some cases, you might feel like, that's such a stupid question. Why? Well, it's leaking because nobody patched it up. Well, why didn't anyone patch it up? Oh, so kind of, allowing people to ask questions, not punishing questions. You don't need to give rewards for questions, but not punishing them with social behavior, with peer pressure, because that is usually how questions are punished. They're not punished, we're going to reduce your salary or something, but by making people feel like idiots, unwelcome, everybody judging them. And it starts from leadership. If the leader isn't afraid to ask questions of himself and of others, but not as accusations. So kind of having leaders actually and managers in position actually asking questions with intent to learn, to illuminate. That's all you need. And it's a long process because it's so easy to drift into the patterns that we have been taught and how we have learned to behave. And it, no matter how much we speak about it, how many videos, podcast episodes, whatever are there about how important this is, there is still some sort of machismo in business. There's still some sort of, why would I ask a question? I will only ask a question if I'm sure that everybody else has that question as well. I don't want to ask a question if I might lose face or reputation or respect from my peers. And it's a difficult thing to balance, and there's no silver bullet, unfortunately.
No, it's, I guess, a question of psychological safety, isn't it, almost? And I know what you mean. I've been in those kind of meetings. Some bosses, they'll go even further. Like, if you ask a question, you're not invited to the next meeting.
Leading with integrity, that's kind of the answer to that one. It's kind of,
absolutely,
if model the behavior you want to see in your people, and people will say like, oh, Bruno, if you're talking about innovation, why those few simple things? Well, because it's simple things. It's not really rocket science. Humans come up with ideas naturally. That's why we are dominant species. If you look, from being naked to kind of having mega cities and infrastructure and all these things, that's because we have inherent capability to create and innovate. So it is within us. It is us. We are suppressing that. So it's simple things to allow that to flourish.
Yeah, good point. Wow, time is flying. We must be having fun. Final question of the day then. This is another one that I ask every guest, and I call it Leadership Heroes. So if you had to pick a person, any person, alive or dead, past or present, historical figure or whatever, who, in your opinion, perfectly embodies leadership, who do you think that would be and why?
Okay, big question. I'll go with my parents. It's not one, so it's my mother and father. Are they perfect? No. Is their leadership perfect? No. But it was good enough, and they enabled me everything I asked for and I wanted for. So I was a troublesome child, very curious, very inquisitive, questions getting you in trouble. But they were always supportive and, never tried to prevent me being who I am. And for that, I'm, very grateful. And I just wish everybody to have such leaders in their life. We discussed, there are many great figures in human history, but they were also imperfect people. And what each and every one of us, or at least most of us, does have some sort of parental figure to lead them through life, at least in our formative stages. And I think those people are very important, and I'm grateful that mine were as they are.
Oh, that's really nice. A personal connection. I don't get many answers like that. I've had Roman emperors, footballers, all sorts of stuff like that, but nobody's ever thought to go in that direction. That's really interesting. Good on you.
Thank you. Roman emperors are impressive, though. Marcus Aurelius, Caesar.
Yeah. In fact, I think it was him. Yeah, it was. Well, there you go. Well, and well done to your parents is all I can say there as well. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today, Bruno. And I guess the last thing really just to finish off is if you want to point the listeners to a website or an email address or anything so they can learn more about what you do and maybe work with you if that's a good fit.
I believe that will be in the notes as well. So whoever is listening, if there was anything that you liked, just reach out to David. He has my contact information, and I will provide him anything that he asks for. Everybody else, you can go to www.pesec.no. Everything I talked about, I make available. So even the writing thing that we were talking about earlier, David. So I just shared, I'm actively blogging from 2016. So I just shared all my lessons learned from that. So you will find on that innovation mistakes, leadership mistakes, everything that we discussed. You can find it on my website, completely free. Go use it. If you do one thing better, I'm happy. David, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for a great conversation. Very, very important topic, like leading with integrity. So important in the world today. And I hope you get 1 million listeners and 10,000 guests, and that more of them picks people in their life for the fascinating leader.
Yeah, agreed. You're very welcome, and it was great to talk to you as well. And that's it from me today as well. Brilliant episode, that one. Loved hearing more about Bruno's approach to innovation, and there's some really useful practical advice there, I think, on how to actually implement what you want to achieve. So do check out Bruno's book, Augmented Strategy, and if you can get hold of a copy of Playing Lean, let me know, because I want to play it too. If you'd like to learn more about leading with integrity and my approach to leadership, as well as my training and mentoring programs for new managers, please do visit www.leadernotaboss.co.uk/sign up. Take care, everyone, and remember, be a leader, not a boss.